This video was not meant to glorify or encourage the emulation of any of the events discussed, only to bring awareness to the victims and ensure that they do not fade from our collective conscious. The information that I provide is what I was able to gather from the internet, and as such does not represent 100% of the impartial truth, only what I could find and decided to include. It's always a tragedy when young, beautiful, talented minds are snuffed out by the likes of lowlifes. And it's even more of a tragedy when those lowlives were trusted, even potentially loved by the victims. Such is the case that is the focus of today's video, a young woman by the name of Bianca Devins. Now, see, Bianca was a young, rising social media personality who unfortunately never got to see the height of her potential due to her life being snuffed out. Hello, and welcome back to The Void if you're coming back. Welcome to The Void if you're new. My name is Ricky Fraley, and today we'll be going over the case of Bianca Michelle Devins. Really quickly before I go into the focus of today's video, I'd like to just tell you guys that I have a Twitter. That'll be down in the description, as well as my Patreon. I know if you guys have finished watching some of the previous videos that I've had, I've thanked my patrons. No, my Patreon, I'd just like to say, if you were to become a patron of the channel at my Inner Circle tier, I do donate a portion of the profits from that tier to a nonprofit by the name of Thorn. Thorn is a nonprofit that helps in the fight against human trafficking, particularly of children, but I felt that they need support, and I'd like to bring it to them. So I've got more information on Thorn over on my Patreon if you do decide to stop by. So come help the fight, I guess. The links to my Twitter and my Patreon will be at the top of the description. So Bianca Michelle Devins was born on October 2nd, 2001 in New Hartford, New York, to Kim and Mike Devins. She had a younger sister who was named Olivia, who was born 2 years later, in 2003. In 2010, Kim and Mike would split for the first time. Kim would cite that Mike was emotionally abusive, and Utica police, the Utica Police Department would confirm this by acknowledging that she had filed multiple domestic incident complaints. Due to Bianca's defensive behavior, she would end up bearing the brunt of her father's anger, and eventually he would leave the family in March of 2015. Bianca would retain little contact with her father. Kim, Bianca's mother, claimed that Bianca was relieved by her father's departure. However, she felt abandoned by him. According to an interview with Bianca's mother, Kim would recall that Bianca's mental health issues started in middle school at the Notre Dame junior/senior high school. Despite a previous bout with separation anxiety in the 3rd grade, Bianca was usually otherwise extroverted and quite popular until she reached adolescence, at which point she seemingly lost interest in everything. Bianca would open up to a select few who shared her love of anime, or drawing, or the Japanese virtual singing app called Vocaloid. But most people who knew her in middle school or high school viewed her as shy or anxious. People who knew her would say that she was kinda on her own. Kim would say that she took Bianca to multiple therapists, however, none of them were really able to help her. In the 9th grade, however, Kim was no longer able to afford Notre Dame as the divorce between her and Bianca's father was finalized, and so she was transferred to Thomas R. Proctor High School, which was a public school in which Bianca continued to fade into the background. According to people close to her, she was just seen as different by most of the people around her. While most would describe Bianca as having been kind or supportive, some would use words like erratic, citing that Bianca would often lie about little extraneous details in her life, like her nationality or her heritage or having been on the autism spectrum. These are just little white lies that she would just make up. Around this time, grade 9 or their freshman year of high school, she would begin dating a boy by the name of Derek Ward. Derek would describe Bianca as the best therapist that he had ever had, but friends of the couple recalled that Bianca slowly became more and more paranoid about Derek being with other girls, and that would cause fights to break out between them, often. Their relationship would eventually end. It would end with Bianca suddenly cutting Derek off and ghosting him and their friends and disappearing from school for weeks at a time. This might have been the beginning signs of Bianca's borderline personality disorder, which is a diagnosis that she wouldn't have been given until 2018. But it's an illness that's characterized by emotional instability, negative self-image, impulsive behavior, and a fear of abandonment. Bianca was also diagnosed with PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, around this time by a therapist, and the other occupants of the house that she lived in would describe that she was triggered by loud noises and shouting, and that she was no longer willing to leave home. Kim recalled and gave this quote. She said, "By the time she'd be ready to go to school, she'd have a panic attack and say, 'I can't do it,' or she'd end up in the nurse's office and have to come home. As a result, she would have to be enrolled in a homebound tutoring program midway through her sophomore year in 2017. This is believed to have been the start of her online personas. When she was stuck at home all day, she would be forced to retreat to the online communities, which made her feel welcome. Bianca would create different personas dependent on the community that she was trying to fit into in order to relate to the people that she was speaking to. But ultimately, the persona that was actually closest to her true self was the one that ended up being the most popular online. While Bianca had only about 2,000 followers on Instagram around the time of her death, the community that she took off in was on a website named 4chan. The 4chan boards that Bianca frequented were more predominantly males, and they were the males that would come together and talk about their experiences with depression and their mental illnesses. Due to the nature of these boards, it also attracted young females who suffered from various mental illnesses that wanted to find a community to fit into. However, older male voices, referred to as orbiters, were very prevalent and essentially worshipped people like Bianca. However, Bianca was also frequently bullied on these 4chan boards. She was bullied by a subset of the internet culture that are referred to as incels, or the involuntarily celibate. Incel. If you don't know what an incel is, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. They're involuntarily celibate. They would call her all sorts of horrible things because she was a girl. It was very misogynistic, things like that. However, it was on one of these boards on 4chan that Bianca would meet her next boyfriend. He remains anonymous to this day for legal reasons, and you'll see why here in just a second. They met in 2017 on 4chan, like I said, and he revealed in interviews that at the time he was 18 while she was 15. He claims that loneliness was a factor that led him to Bianca. He said that Bianca was the one who asked to be with him, so she asked him to be her boyfriend within a week of first speaking on 4chan, and that they would continue to see each other on and off for the next 2 years. In August of 2017, Bianca ran away to Long Island to be with him. However, her mother would eventually track her down, and when Bianca got word that the police were coming to pick her up, she attempted to run into oncoming traffic. This act would end with her being institutionalized in a mental facility in Nassau County for 5 days. Everyone around them, including her boyfriend, would admit and acknowledge that the relationship between the two of them was toxic. He, on his own, struggled with substance abuse and also had bipolar disorder. So it's really not hard to imagine how they would have been toxic to each other in a relationship, and that them being together did eventually do more harm than good to each of them. He would accuse Bianca of messaging other guys, which led to them breaking up that winter. According to Bianca's friends, though, he would retaliate by sending sexually explicit content that included the both of them, him at 18 and her at 15, through a platform called Discord, without her consent. This is illegal. It's called revenge porn, and I believe it was illegal back then. I don't know exactly when it became illegal, but I'm pretty sure it was illegal, not only because it was also CP, because she was 15, she was a minor at the time. Bianca would eventually find out and show screenshots of him posting these things to her mother. Then her mother and Bianca together would report him to the police. However, upon him threatening to end things, Bianca stopped cooperating with the authorities and stopped cooperating with the investigation altogether. Despite all of this, Bianca continued to run away in order to be with him, leading her mother to file 3 separate missing persons reports between the months of August 2017 and June 2018. So around this time, Bianca told one of her mental health counselors that she had been fantasizing about ending things, and this led to her being subsequently placed in Pinefield, which is a psychiatric facility in Utica, New York. She stayed there for a month. By all accounts, Bianca enjoyed her time there. However, shortly after being released, she would again run away to be with that same anonymous boyfriend. As a result of this, Kim would have Bianca placed on a persons in need of supervision hold, with a judge ordering her to wear an ankle monitor and be placed on house arrest in order to avoid her running away again. She would, however, violate the PINS order by cutting off her ankle monitor and then running away again. By October 2018, Bianca was moved to St. Anne Institute, a residential placement facility in Albany, New York. It is here that she found a counselor that she really liked and started a type of cognitive behavior therapy that was aimed at ending things, ideation, and self-destructive behaviors, if you know what I mean. So, after spending most of 2018 away from home, she would return home in February of 2019. She would re-enroll in her high school and then subsequently graduate. By all accounts, including her own, her mental health had improved by a lot. She made tremendous improvements in her mental health. In May of 2019, on a question and answer app named Telenym, Bianca said, "I really have been happier and just doing generally better. I'm almost 18 and I look at myself 2 years ago and I'm like, damn." Bianca was, at this point in time, looking forward to college. In particular, she had plans to attend Mohawk Valley Community College before transferring to a school in New York City. She wanted to pursue a degree in psychology so that eventually one day she could help others, just like the psychiatrist that had helped her. Bianca also used this time to reconnect with her old friends, and even her first boyfriend, Ward, who disclosed that he had made plans to tell her how he felt but would ultimately never get that chance. In April of 2019, Bianca would meet a boy by the name of Brandon Andrew Clark through the social media app Instagram. Brandon Clark was born on October 6, 1997, and grew up in an unstable household. His father was abusive towards his mother, and Clark's father would hold his mother at knife point for 10 hours because he believed that she was cheating on him. This would lead to his placement in state foster care. Childhood friends would describe Brandon as very obsessive, citing his fixation with games like Pokemon or Lolicon. I personally don't know what Lolicon is, but I know what Pokemon is, and I can't say that I'm not. Some people would describe me as obsessed too, but I just like games. He was also said to be quite fond of fitness, gaming, and the anime Madoka Magica, which I've also never heard about before. It should also be noted that Brandon's childhood friend had discovered that Clark was speaking to a 12-year-old. Yikes. and that when he confronted him about this, the two would never speak again. Yikes, man. 12, that's a lot. That's bad. Bianca and Clark would eventually meet in person at her high school graduation party. Bianca's mother would later meet Clark in person and describe him as polite and charming. This would lead to the two developing a relationship. However, the full extent of that relationship was never truly known, as Bianca opened up to her mother that she had no intentions to formally date Clark, despite him wanting more. He would oftentimes refer to himself as her boyfriend. This is something that she never corroborated and never really went along with. The police would eventually conclude that the two did indeed have a personally intimate relationship, despite her friends and family denying it as well. Here comes the bad part. So on July 13th, 2019, the pair, along with a third male friend named Alex, who went by the handle Oipu, would attend a show where Nicole Dolenganger was performing in New York City. The three began their evening by smoking marijuana in Clark's car before attending the show. During the show, Alex and Bianca would share a kiss, while Clark was awake getting more rolling papers. This kiss would anger Clark, who was believed to have witnessed it. While they were on the way home from that concert, Bianca would eventually fall asleep in the back seat of the car. Clark would wake her up. He confronted her about the kiss between her and Alex, and Bianca would apologize. However, she would make clear that she and Clark were not in a monogamous relationship. This would only anger Clark more, and unsatisfied with her answer, he proceeded to viciously slit her throat. So viciously that she was nearly decapitated in the car. Clark also made numerous videos before and during the act and would call numerous family members. Due to the nature of these phone calls and the discovery of an ending things note at his aunt's home, his family would call 911. At 6:03 a.m. the following day, a post was made to Bianca's Discord server. The post read, "Sorry fuckers, you're gonna have to find somebody else to orbit," along with the image of Bianca with her throat cut and face splattered with blood. By 7:20 a.m., Discord users from all over the country would notify the police of the graphic images. When asked by one Discord user where the picture was from, Clark responded, "My fucking car. I fucked Bianca, dumbass." He said that before telling his followers to subscribe to the YouTuber PewDiePie, which, if you don't know, telling people to subscribe to PewDiePie, or just saying sub to PewDiePie, which it was a meme that went around at the time. Basically, PewDiePie, it doesn't matter. Just know that it was a meme. It was also said during the Christchurch mosque shooting, I believe, if that was what that was. It was said after a mass shooting as well, because these edgelords thought that they were cool and ironic that after these crimes they would be like, "Oh, sub to PewDiePie, I'm so cool." Don't be like them, please. In addition to the videos and images on Discord, Clark had posted alarming messages and images on his Instagram stories, and would post the image of a woman's bloody arm with the caption, "I'm sorry, Bianca." He also changed his bio to show the current date as the day he died. Clark's mother would go on to reveal that she received a message at some point of that night from Clark, telling her that he was sorry and that he loved her. Clark himself also called the police, and he went on to tell the dispatcher, and this is a quote, so I'm not going to alter it. He said, "My name is Brandon. The victim is Bianca Michelle Devins. I'm not going to stay on the phone for long because I still need to do the suicide part of the murder-suicide." After this call was made, officers were dispatched to the scene. Once the first officer arrived, he observed a small bonfire and Clark lying on a green tarp that had brown hair protruding from beneath it. His destroyed laptop and hard drives were also at the scene, along with a spray painting on the ground with the words, "May you never forget me," all while live streaming to his followers. The officer would question Clark as to the whereabouts of Bianca, to which Clark responded with, and I quote, "Where the fuck do you think she is?" He then proceeded to cut his own throat and take a selfie which he would post on his Instagram story with the caption, "Ashes to ashes." Officers would observe him rocking back and forth in obvious pain. Clark would survive his self-inflicted injuries, with doctors deeming him well enough to be questioned the next day. One officer associated with the case made the following statements, and I quote, "Clark's alleged crime, combined with the evidence he had posted on Discord and Instagram, sent the only message he wanted to convey, that he was not, in the parlance of his community, just another one of Bianca's, quote, beta orbiters, but he was someone who was in control, who couldn't be fucked with. He'd wanted something from her, and when she couldn't or wouldn't give it to him, he had to send her and the rest of the world a message. You can't do this to someone like me, because this is what will happen to you." Over the next few months, while Bianca's death was being investigated, it became apparent that Clark had planned to kill Bianca. He placed spray paints in his car, which he would eventually use after the act, to spray paint a quote from a Japanese manga. He also carried and hid the knife that he'd used to end Bianca's life in his car, along with the videotape equipment that he'd used. Clark's search history also revealed that from May to July 2019, he had searched how to kill/incapacitate someone, and he had searched for information specifically about the carotid artery, choking, and hanging. His search history also contained information about Bianca, and he had taken several screenshots of their conversations. So, in the trial, Clark would plead not guilty to second-degree murder on July 29th, 2019. He would later be charged with promoting prison contraband after corrections officers found a shiv constructed out of a sharpened toothbrush in his cell. According to Bianca's mother, he would send a letter to a friend which bragged about the murder and how he felt as a result of killing Bianca. The letter also reportedly explained that he couldn't handle the thought of her walking out of his life. Clark would eventually change his plea to guilty ahead of his trial on February 10th, 2020. However, against his wishes, the video which Clark took while he was committing the act was announced to the public, and it hurt his defense, which had been that he was unable to recall the details of her death. Lieutenant Koramato would describe the contents of the footage in court. This is what he said. Bianca is seen sleeping in the backseat of Clark's car when Clark wakes her up to have a discussion about an incident he had witnessed earlier, in which he saw Bianca kissing another boy at a Nicole concert in Queens, New York. Bianca apologizes, but reminds Clark that they are not monogamous, and basically, it makes clear that they're not together. Clark, however, responds that her answer is not good enough, and then is seen striking her, prompting Bianca to threaten to get out of the car and walk home if Clark does not bring her home. At this point, Clark attacks her with a knife he had retrieved from his trunk and was hiding by the seat. Clark then proceeded to videotape Bianca taking her last breaths before taking photos of her body and posting them on social media. His sentencing was originally scheduled for April 7th, but it was delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. On June 2nd, 2020, Clark would file a notice to withdraw his plea, citing claims his lawyers had failed him. However, a judge denied this notice due to his admission of guilt, and as such, a hearing would take place on September 30th of 2020, and a written decision was drawn up on October 30th, 2020. Clark was sentenced to 25 years to life on March 16th, 2021. Clark's mother would criticize the prosecution for portraying her son as a manipulative monster, attributing the internet searches to Clark researching methods for his own ending of things, and not to the planning of Bianca's murder. Clark has also expressed remorse over the situation. The media attention surrounding the case was immense due to the images of Bianca's gruesome murder being leaked. This led to attention from all around the world. Many people attempted to use Bianca's death photos to further their own agendas, or to scare people away from meeting people online, both of which the Devin family was against. The family in particular had to deal with the constant bombardment of these images of their daughter and sister dead in the backseat of a car, due to the image's accessibility and the fact that people were spreading them continuously on the internet. Bianca's family eventually had to live with a lot, including Bianca's stepdad receiving the image online, along with threats to his life, and her mother having to live with the constant regret of the negative impact that the images were having on a lot of people who had seen it inadvertently and were scarred by it, as well as, mourning the loss of their daughter. As a result, on September 21st, 2020, Brinsley and Devin's family introduced Bianca's Law. The proposed legislation would require all social media platforms with more than $10 million in revenue and with over 100,000 monthly users to establish an office dedicated to identifying and removing violent content that violates the platform's moderation standards. Kim Devins would go on to start a scholarship for students pursuing psychology degrees in the name of her daughter. The images that I spoke about today are still online. However, I implore you not to go looking for them. I would ask that you not search for Bianca Devins, as they most likely will pop up, and I recommend against doing that. Not only do I personally believe that it's disrespectful and that you should let her rest in peace, but I know people. Somebody out there is getting the sick satisfaction that Bianca is still being viewed by unwilling people every day. So I recommend against looking for it. If you want to know more about the case, however, go ahead. Just be warned that you can and potentially will see something that you won't ever be able to forget, potentially. But I'm not going to ask if you liked it, but if you learned something, go ahead and leave me a comment down below. Like I said, down there is the link to my Twitter and my Patreon. Every donation everybody who signs up in my inner circle, a portion of the profits will be going to Thorn to help combat trafficking in persons. And then the rest will obviously be going towards the channel to help me make better content faster, to help educate more people and to keep victims like Bianca Devins in our collective conscious. So if you're not subscribed, you can go ahead and subscribe, join my little community. Leave me a comment, leave me a like, or a dislike if you disliked it. But thank you for gazing into the void with me this week, and I'll be back next week at the same time to gaze into it some more. Thank you. Stay safe, and I love you guys.